Did you grow up thinking that practice is just work that you have to get through before you can actually enjoy music? In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about how repetition and ear training can actually become the most playful and creative part of your musicianship training. You're going to learn how to make drills more engaging, spot real progress, and turn routine practice into something you look forward to. So let's dive in. I don't know where we came up with this idea that you have to work before you play, whether it's school, your upbringing, siblings, work. I don't know where it came from, but I'm suggesting you should try and reframe that and realize that the work is play, you know? And we often hear that ear training is very difficult. People view it as kind of a waste of time. It's hard to convince musicians that ear training is actually necessary. I actually have an easier time working with hobbyists because they have the free time, they have the resources, and they have the desire to develop skills, and they're not necessarily trying to use it to become, world-class musicians. But it's the world-class musicians that actually need the training. We reach a point where we get so busy working as musicians that we forget if we keep going back to these fundamentals, that will make our daily life learning new music, performing, getting new interpretations, understand how to phrase, it'll make all of that easier. And even your musical memory. I mean, imagine just being able to go out and you forget your music, but you know how to hear the chord progressions around you and you can improvise freely. These are some of the things that the work, we're going to put that in quotes, entails. It develops these skills so that when it's time to actually perform and perform in front of an audience, you are able to perform at a high level. But a lot of the work, and I'm using that term lightly because I think work can actually be a lot of fun if you frame it the right way. A lot of that work is repetition. And so we always had this joke in college where ear training wasn't ear training, it was ear straining because it was work, it was hard. It was seen as the least interesting part of musicianship studies. Same with music theory. Not all students felt this way, but a lot of them felt like music theory and ear training were something to just sort of get through. And I understand that as an undergraduate who is really balancing all kinds of things like you're just trying to figure out how you're going to pay your school bill, your rent, how you're going to pass that next exam, how you're going to learn your instrument, how you're going to pass your juries. You're doing all these things, and it feels like the ear training music theory isn't really helping you towards your goals. And so I actually have a lot more success with older students because they've already been through all that. And so they also have the context to be able to put this into perspective. I was actually teaching a student yesterday, one of my composition students, and he said that he actually feels like music composition, music theory, ear training, all this stuff hits differently when you're older. And that makes sense to me as well because you have more context. You're no longer just fighting to survive. Maybe you're a little more secure in your career. You're a little more established. And so you can go back, you can study music theory, you can study ear training, and you can learn how it will actually impact your compositions because you have more context, you have more experience, and you're not overwhelmed with a million different things. So what I'm getting at here is when we approach our ear training exercises, unfortunately, one of the best ways to develop the ear is repetition. And so, one of the things that I do in my ear training course, the Flawless course, is I will use repetition, but I try and make it as interesting as possible. And you'll notice this once you get into Unit 2. You'll notice a little bit in Unit 1. You'll definitely notice it in Unit 4. But what happens is you're going to get these drills that are very similar, but they're gradually increasing in difficulty, or they're approaching the same concept from a slightly different way. So we're using a lot of repetition to develop your skills. But what's happening in the background is the slight change in novelty is enough to keep challenging you. So repetition is a good thing. but you don't want repetition that is so boring that you keep doing the same thing every day and you tune out. So one of the exercises I created, which I thought it was really effective for my undergraduates, because we only had 45 minutes for ear training, then maybe 30 minutes for music theory. That's how I structured my classes. I did more ear training than theory because I could teach a student ear training over the course of a long period of time. Music theory we could teach quickly though. So I didn't need to spend as much time with music theory as I did ear training. And I did these daily routines and mirror exercises. So once you learned the daily routine, there were 7 of them. You could go through it in 6 minutes and it would take you through scales, chords, intervals, and a warm up. And you would do this every day. And that would be like your core warm up, core workout. And then the mirror exercises were individual exercises that focus more deeply on whatever interval you're having trouble with at that point in time. And if you're going along with the daily routine, well, daily routine 1 focuses on the 5th and the 4th. So you do the mirror exercise that focuses on the perfect 5th and the perfect 4th. But they're repetitive and they're meant to be. They're meant to be because they're short and they're fast. You go through, once you've learned it, you're done in 10 minutes. And I use them at the beginning of every one of my classes for 2 weeks at a time. So students, if they came to class, they got it 8 days in a row. And then we'd go on to the next daily routine. So you can kind of see how this works. 7 daily routines, 14 weeks in a semester, not counting midterms and finals. So you had a daily routine for every week. And then in more advanced courses, we do other types of daily routines. But we always started with this 10-minute exercise that was fast. So that is a type of repetition that you can sort of start to tune out on. So one of the ways you stay engaged is you make sure you're singing it or you're audioing along with the audio file. And what this does is it makes sure that every single day your ear gets to hear the fundamental components of tonal music. It's not going to be all music. It's not going to be dealing with secundo chords or even secondary dominants or augmented 6 chords and more advanced progressions or more advanced harmonies. But it gives you those fundamentals and it embeds them so deeply in your consciousness that you are able to develop from this quick 10-minute routine. Now, that is a type of repetition that can be a little bit boring, but you just push through it. You do it every day because it's only 10 minutes and you can do anything for 10 minutes. Maybe you can't hang from a bar for 10 minutes, but you can do most anything for 10 minutes, right? So then from there, you go into ear training exercises, and those have to change, but they also have to be repetitive. So I firmly believe that the way to a really good ear is that you start with very specific intervals, like a perfect 5th and a perfect 4th is what I like to start with. I start with the 5th and the 4th because they're fundamental to tonal music, and they are used so much in music. So it's one of those things where you get a lot of return. So if you're listening to a pop song or a classical piece, even hip hop, any type of music out there really that uses a tonal basis, you're going to hear these 4ths and 5ths. They're going to start to become obvious to you in the actual music. And there's such prominent and can be such easy to identify intervals that once you get them in your brain, then the ear train actually starts to take off because you're hearing them in the music you're listening to, the music you're playing, in addition to the exercises. So we spend a lot of time really making sure that you can hear these 4ths and 5ths in multiple different ways. But the exercises gradually increase, they gradually change. So I think you need to reframe what work is. And I think you need to reframe what repetition is. We view repetition as boring, but it can be meditative. You sit there, you close your eyes, you go through these exercises. With the audio version of the Flawless course, you don't need to look at anything ever. I mean, the dictations for Unit 1, you'll want to check those against the PDF that you can download. But for the most part, you don't need to ever look at anything. You can just go through and listen. And so if you learn to treat it like a meditation and a moment for yourself to just kind of relax, tune everything else out, put everything else aside, whatever you have to do that day, you can deal with it later. You take your 30 to 45 minutes of ear training, and this is your time to center yourself and develop skills. If you do that, then the repetition can actually start to become enjoyable and you'll start to hear new things. So it's about what you're listening for. If you are just trying to complete an exercise and you're saying, okay, that's a 4th, that's a 5th, that's a 4th, 4th, 5th, and you've got that down, and you're able to complete these exercises easily, then the repetition can become boring. But if you're always trying to push your perception and you're trying, once you can identify them easily, because a lot of you will be able to identify intervals after unit one, the fourth and the fifth, if you then try and hear more, like what's different about this fourth compared to this fourth I just heard? There's different colors that come out. You'll hear, for example, here's a perfect fourth. I'm going to play that for you. You'll notice that the fourth and the fifth, they sound different in different registers with a different bass note. So that's a perfect fourth. This is also a perfect fourth. There's something the same, but there's something different. This one here, it feels heartier somehow. This one up here, somehow thinner, but they both have that quality to them. It's not perfect pitch, but it's recognizing the quality of the fourth in different contexts. Here's another fourth. Also different. How about this one? It's also different. And so one of the things I realized when I was teaching in college was if I played all the intervals in C major, I used C as a starting point, just the bass notes using the major scale. So this is a perfect fourth, fourth, fourth. I have to change this one. I got to change the fourth to a B flat. Students would be able to get higher scores on their exams. And I realized one of the issues was that when we moved to different keys and when we used different fourths, when we started to go all over the keyboard, it actually became harder for them to identify the fourth versus the fifth. So the key actually changes it, but it's not the key signature that's doing it. It's the simple fact that if you become familiar with a fourth, hearing it like this, C and F, you can learn what that sounds like. And up here, up here. You can learn to hear what that fourth sounds like. If I then change the bottom pitch, but it's still a perfect fourth, it takes on a slightly different quality. And one of the notes that people have a special difficulty with is the B and the E. Anytime I include a B or a B flat, it really throws off the ear. So these are things I just started to notice while I was teaching. And so what I realized in order to really teach ear training effectively is we need to go through each key multiple times. So you'll see in unit 1, 2, 3, 4, we're constantly going through all the keys. So each unit will focus on one key, and then towards the end, before the final exam, we'll include everything. And we'll do that multiple times because that's what helps you learn to identify what's similar about all these different perfect fourths. And that's the key there. A perfect fourths are different. So this is where the repetition comes in. If you are doing ear training and you're just saying that's a fourth and you're not listening very deeply, then what will happen is you'll start to be able to identify a fourth and a fifth and all these other intervals in the context of the lesson. But when you go outside of the lesson and all of a sudden the fourth takes on different timbres, like a violin or a guitar or a percussion instrument that's pitched, like a xylophone, a marimba, maybe a vibraphone, all of a sudden the quality of the fourth, it's still there, but it's hidden behind the timbre. And so what you need to do when you're doing these repetitive exercises, if you feel like ear training is repetitive, is you need to try and, once you can identify the intervals in the context given to you, which is usually piano, although I do switch that up in later units, what you want to do is you want to hear past that interval. You want to start to hear the quality of it. How do different perfect fourths in different registers change? That's going to be the thing that allows repetition to become not so repetitive, repetitive, right? You're actually able to start to hear different qualities. So my point here is that if you think something is really repetitive, playing scales is repetitive, but do you always just play a scale at the same metronome marking with the same articulations, or do you change it up? Sometimes do you do the natural effect where you crescendo to the top of the scale and decrescendo the way down? Do you switch it up ever? Where you decrescendo on the way up and you crescendo on the way down? These are little things you can do in your routine to make the repetition less repetitive, right? It's no longer repetitive. And I'm just kind of encouraging you to enjoy the repetition, find enjoyment in that repetition. So you always want to try and just do the exercises and whatever you're doing on a surface level first. You're just trying to get the answer right. But once you can start to get the answer right, that's where the real fun begins, because you can start to go deeper into these intervals and you can start to actually hear the differences in qualities as we move along, or you can start to hear actual vibrations, or you can start to hear overtones. So you're always searching for something more. And if you take it from the viewpoint of, I'm just trying to hear more in sound, then it can become fun, because as you start to hear these different and you have these different experiences, it really opens up your ear and it becomes much more enjoyable. So, I mean, you can try and turn ear training into a game, but I think the more important thing is to say, okay, I'm doing this exercise. How can I get more out of it? This is where the art of ear training comes in, because I can give you a comprehensive program that goes step by step, doesn't skip any steps, and will build your ear. And you will, if you just follow the program and you just kind of take it on a surface level, your ear will get better. 100%. It's almost impossible not to, because it's constantly challenging in an incremental way where we just get a little bit better every day. But that leads to huge results over the course of 2 or 3 years. That's how long the course should take you, 2 to 3 years. If you take your time and you view these exercises, once they become familiar, you view them as an opportunity to get deeper into the exercise, to find new layers to the exercise. That's when the real development happens. So you want to avoid burnout, but burnout, I think, is such an overused term, because you can get burnout and not want to do anything. But here's what happens. Eventually, that burnout goes away, even if you keep working through the burnout. And 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe a couple months have passed, and then you say, you know what, I'm ready to do it again. And you come back, and you'll probably find the ear is actually improved just from the exercise you already did. It's not like you're starting over. And then you try it again, but you get burnout again, you take a break, and you repeat this cycle. I'm telling you that you can work through burnout. You can sit down, press play, do it on a surface level, almost passive. If you try and do at least 5 to 10 minutes of ear training every day, like let's say you're taking the audio version of the Flawless course, press play for 5 to 10 minutes and be done. Just be like, okay, that's all I can do today. But at least I did something. If you do that during the periods where you feel low motivation or burnout, you're gonna, when you finally come out of it, which you will, we always do, you will come back and you won't have lost so much ground. You'll have continued to push yourself forward. So you want to kind of avoid burnout by really just saying, this is important to me. This is the difference between somebody who develops a really good ear and somebody who doesn't. It's really simple, and it's not actually that hard. When you commit to coming in every single day and just doing the work, you are already ahead of most people, because most people, they have good intentions. They'll stick with something for a couple weeks, maybe a couple days, but then something happens and they get too busy and their priorities, they shift. And so you kind of have to decide, if this is something that you want, you're going to spend at least 5 to 10 minutes every day on it, no matter what. That's going to be the difference between somebody that eventually succeeds and somebody that doesn't. And often what happens when you get in, you do your 5 to 10 minutes, you then want to do more. Sometimes it's just getting going. And that's why I try and make this easy. Like if you get the audio version of the Flawless course, you download it to your phone, it's right there. You can literally, while you're making coffee or eating breakfast, just press play and listen to it and get maybe 50% of it. Don't move on to another lesson until you've been able to focus and actually complete a full lesson with your full energy. But you can do it while doing other things. So it's really going to be the difference between people that succeed and people that quit. I know people who were not the greatest musicians, but they kept going. And now they are playing professionally. They are making money as musicians. They were the ones that never gave up, the ones that kept practicing. And of course, you're going to take some days off. You're going to feel sick. You're just not going to be able to bring yourself to do a session one day. But as much as you can, just have the mindset that I'm better off if I come in and do this than if I take the day off and don't. Because if you come in and you do the work, you're going to see the progress. So today is a little bit of a shorter session. I just wanted to kind of talk about the importance of repetition and the importance of just showing up. The people that eventually succeed show up every day. When I was doing that perfect pitch challenge for 30 days, that was difficult. I had a lot of things come into my life that could have derailed it. And I may not have been able to come in one day. There were plenty of days during that 30-day challenge where I was like, I don't have time to set up my camera, to set up a microphone, to press record, to then let that video process, upload it, create a thumbnail, write a description, respond to comments, make sure it's in the right order in the playlist. Like it's a lot more than just recording a video and putting it out there. But I wanted to do something that really shows you that you can do it. I mean, I had family come over. We had things happen, things that had to be taken care of immediately. There were days where I was traveling almost the entire day, but I still got in at least a 15 to 30-minute session and I posted it online. And I did every session live because you can't really fake that on YouTube as far as I know. You if it's a live session, you press record and you're live. There's a delay of maybe 7 seconds, 20 depending on your internet connection. But the point is you come in and if it's live, people can see it's live. And so I did that to show you that you can make a commitment to doing something and make it a priority. The problem is when you have too many priorities. So you really have to decide, what am I going to focus on? And it's not forever. Ear training is not forever, but you do have these seasons of growth, these seasons of time where you just have to put a lot of effort into something. So that's actually a season I'm in right now because I'm creating these courses. I'm creating Counterpoint, audiation, the composing hour, the inner ear training course. I'm creating this baby ear training program. I'm working on the flawless course. I'm posting YouTube videos each week. I'm doing all this while also making sure I spend several hours with my child, my family, and I'm making it a priority. And I'm working harder than I'll have to work in the future. Because right now is a growth phase. I'm trying to build up this collection of materials, and I'm not even worrying too much about marketing them. That's not the goal right now. The goal right now is to get in, get these videos recorded, and then once they're all out, that's actually when I can spend some time to think about, okay, who would actually benefit from this? Who should I talk to about, hey, maybe you should take this course? But that growth phase, we all go through it at different periods of our life. And I'm doing it right now because I was working in university. I did it for 8 years. I ended as a visiting assistant professor, was going to faculty meetings, and that was taking up a lot of time. But when that position ended, was discontinued, I said, okay, I need to take everything that I've been teaching and I need to put it out there in kind of a course format. Maybe nobody will take these courses. That was my attitude. But I need to do this. I need to get this knowledge that I've been teaching, these lectures that I've refined semester after semester after semester, while they're fresh, and I need to record them. And so my goal is actually to get all of this done by the end of 2025. We'll see if I can do it. I have a feeling that the flawless course may take a little longer, but basically what I'm doing is I'm giving myself 6 months now. I've had a year and I've done a lot in the year, but I'm giving myself 6 more months to get this done because I have to move on to other things. I have to move out of this growth phase. And you may be in a growth phase right now where you are sitting there and you are trying to establish something. You're trying to establish your ear. You're trying to establish your career as a musician. You're a hobbyist who just wants a new hobby on the weekend, something to constantly stimulate your mind, a hobby. Whatever your stage is, whatever your purpose, just go for it, and realize that growth stages don't have to be permanent. I'm doing this, and my motivation, talking about motivation for, and everything I do is very repetitive. I come in every day and I kind of do the same thing every day. That could get very boring. And I could say, I'm going to quit. And there's times when I definitely think, oh, this is exhausting. Like I want to go out and see the world. But I know that I'm in a temporary stage. And when it's done, at the very least, I will feel like I've accomplished what I set out to accomplish. And I'll have sort of this legacy of courses and videos that will be there for life. So the motivation for me is not necessarily creating these courses, it's knowing that I have an opportunity right now to put everything I've been doing into a concrete format that can be replayed for years to come. And so that's what I'm suggesting to you, that you want to try and find the thing that motivates you. It may not be the actual action. It may not be the ear training. Ear training may be something that you don't want to do. Learning music theory may be something you don't want to do. But you need to say, what will it get me if I do it? Where will I end up if I stick to this program and I'm able to do this? I'm able to succeed. Maybe it will be that you're a more fluid performer. Maybe it will be that you actually have to practice less for performances. Maybe it will be that you're a better improviser, and maybe it gets you a higher paying gig. Maybe it means that you spend less time working on your compositions in front of a computer or however you do it, a keyboard, and more time just enjoying life outside and hearing things in your head, and you develop the memory to be able to retain that information. And if you don't develop the memory, there's memory tricks. And I teach all that in the composing hour course. But the point is, when you have a growth period, you have to say some things have to go. Maybe you spend less time on social media because you know that every moment you spend there is a moment you could be working towards this eventual goal. And you don't view the work as something that's boring or that you can't maintain. You view it as a temporary situation that will get you to your goal. And it's just repetition. It's learning to enjoy the process, learning to enjoy coming in each day and seeing that little marker move point by point, getting closer to your goal. For me, I'm in my form and analysis course right now. I'm close. I have like 6 lectures left. 6 lectures is easy. Compared to what I did in the university, I would sometimes teach 6 lectures in a single day. But the difference and the thing that I found out was actually I can't just sit down and press record and then pop out a lecture. When you're actually creating video content, there's just so many other things are involved. The audio, the video, everything actually matters. It's very different to just show up, have the materials ready, pass them out to the class, write something on the board, and teach a classroom full of live students because there's feedback, there's interaction. You have goals, you meet those goals. You don't have to worry about audio quality or speakers or technology. You just go in and do it. So that's the one thing that ended up making me take a little bit longer, but I think in 6 months I'll be done and I will have achieved my goal. And how will I have done it? Repetition. I do this every day. I make sure it gets done. Sometimes I wake up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning just so that I can record when it's quiet. You probably might even be able to hear my child in the background. So I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to do another one of these next week. Right now, these are coming out on Tuesdays and Fridays, so I hope you can join me. If you're interested in any of my courses, you can go check them out. It's at URE, 3 letters, UreMusic.com. That's my last name. Or you can just join me on YouTube and download the podcast and enjoy these in your free time. You don't have to do anything else. So I will see you next time. Thank you for joining me, and keep up the work. Keep up the good work. If you're in a growth phase, just realize it's temporary and keep focused on the goal. The keeping focused on the goal can make the journey more enjoyable.